Black Waitress sees her childhood photo in Millionaire's house. She is shocked to discover she was the daughter he lost 20 years ago. "My God, it's me." The words came out as a whisper from Jasmine's lips as she stared at the golden frame hanging in the private hallway of the Blackwell mansion. Her fingers trembled, almost dropping the crystal tray she was carrying. There, framed like a precious relic, was a photo of her at age 4. The same shy smile, the same unruly curls, even the little pink dress she vaguely remembered wearing. But how on earth did her childhood photo end up decorating the wall of one of Chicago's wealthiest families? Jasmine Mitchell, 24, had served champagne at dozens of high society events, but she never expected to find pieces of her lost past in a mansion where it cost more than $1,000 to step on the marble floor. Raised in foster homes since she was a baby, she always knew there were gaps in her history. Social workers spoke vaguely of difficult circumstances and documents lost in a fire, but never in her worst nightmares did she imagine that the answer was hanging on the wall of Richard Blackwell, the same man who half an hour earlier had walked past her, as if she were invisible. "Hey you, what are you doing here?" The security guard's harsh voice brought her back to reality. "Employees are not allowed in the private wings." "Sorry, I got lost looking for the bathroom," Jasmine lied, forcing a smile as her heart raced. She memorized every detail of that photo before walking away. Back in the main hall, her eyes automatically searched for Richard Blackwell among the guests. There he was, impeccable in his tailored tuxedo, talking about his charitable foundation for underprivileged children, while the millionaires in attendance applauded his generosity. What cruel irony. The man who talked about helping abandoned children had a photo of his own abandoned daughter decorating his home like a secret trophy. Jasmine watched Richard's every gesture, every word, every calculated smile. There was something in his eyes when he spoke of second chances and broken families, a thinly veiled guilt that she recognized immediately. When Richard casually mentioned the personal tragedy that motivated him to help other families, Jasmine felt her blood run cold. Personal tragedy. She hadn't died. She had been abandoned. "Life sometimes forces us to make impossible decisions," Richard continued, his voice heavy with rehearsed emotion. "Lowing a daughter changes a man forever, losing or discarding." In that moment, as she watched the man who was probably her biological father receive congratulations for his courage to turn his pain into purpose, Jasmine made a decision that would change both their lives forever. She was going to find out the whole truth, and when she did, Richard Blackwell was going to pay dearly for every lie he had told, every tear she had shed, every night she had spent wondering why she wasn't good enough to be loved. But while everyone applauded the philanthropist of the year, no one noticed the smile that formed at the corner of Jasmine's mouth. It wasn't the smile of a daughter finding her lost father. It was the smile of someone who had just discovered their enemy's weak spot. If you feel like this story goes way beyond a simple family reunion, you're right. Subscribe to the channel, because what Jasmine was about to discover about Richard Blackwell would make his philanthropy seem like a joke compared to the revenge she had in mind. 3 days after the event, Jasmine couldn't get that photo out of her head. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the innocent smile of the child she once was, hanging as a decoration in the home of the man who should have protected her. She needed answers. But where to start? Richard Blackwell was untouchable, CEO of a multinational company, board member of 3 universities, and ironically, patron of orphanages across the state. The man had built an empire on his own. Hypocrisy. That's when she remembered Marcus, the veteran bartender who worked at all of Chicago's elite events. If anyone knew the dirty secrets of those people, it was him, Blackwell. Marcus almost choked on his coffee when Jasmine mentioned the name. "Girl, you don't want to mess with that man. He has tentacles everywhere." "Why do you say that?" Jasmine asked, pretending to be casual as she wiped the glasses. Marcus looked around, making sure they were alone in the service area. "There are rumors, old ones, about a daughter he had who just disappeared off the map. His wife died in a suspicious accident when the girl was about 4 years old." Jasmine's blood ran cold. 4 years old, the age in the photo. The strange thing is that after the accident, Blackwell inherited an astronomical fortune from his wife's life insurance. And the girl, she was never heard from again. It's as if she evaporated. But he talks so much about helping orphan children. Marcus laughed bitterly. Of course he does. Nothing better to clean a dirty conscience than a charitable foundation with his name stamped in gold letters. That night, Jasmine created fake profiles on social media and began investigating. She discovered that Richard had married 3 times after the death of his first wife, always to much younger women who signed strict prenuptial agreements. All of his subsequent marriages had lasted no more than 2 years. Even more interesting, she found old articles about Helena Blackwell, her biological mother. The woman had been a children's rights activist fighting to reform the adoption system. The last article about her mentioned that she was investigating irregularities at private adoption agencies 2 weeks before she died. How convenient. Jasmine printed everything she found and organized a timeline. Helena had discovered something compromising about adoption agencies. 2 weeks later, she died in an accident. Richard inherited everything, and his daughter mysteriously disappeared. She needed more information, and she knew exactly where to get it. Margaret Santos, a retired private investigator who frequented the cafe where she worked in the mornings. "Margaret, I need a favor," Jasmine said, pouring the extra strong cappuccino the woman always ordered. "From the sound of it, I'm guessing it's not a small one. I need information on someone important." Margaret studied Jasmine's face for a long moment. At 65, she had developed a keen instinct for recognizing when someone was desperate for justice. "How much can you pay? I can work for you. Cleaning, organizing, whatever you need." "Interesting." Margaret smiled. "It's been a while since I've had a real case. Tell me everything." As Jasmine told her story, Margaret took notes in a worn notebook. When she finished, the investigator looked at her with respect. "Sweetheart, you're not just looking for your father. You're hunting a predator who may have killed your mother." Over the next few days, Margaret began digging. What she discovered was even worse than they had imagined. Richard hadn't just abandoned Jasmine. He had forged documents declaring her dead in the same accident that killed Helena. "Look at this." Margaret showed her the printed papers, a fake death certificate, a statement that the body was never found. "Your father received life insurance money for you, too." Jasmine felt nauseous. "He profited from my supposed death, $500,000. And he didn't stop there. He used the tragedy to create the charitable foundation. His entire image as a man who overcame grief through charity was built on the lie of your death." Margaret continued leafing through the documents. "There's more. Helena had hired a private investigator 2 weeks before she died. She suspected Richard was selling children through an illegal adoption ring. The investigator disappeared shortly after she did. It was then that Jasmine realized Richard's cruel genius. He hadn't just gotten rid of an unwanted daughter and an inconvenient wife. He had turned their double murder into social and financial capital. "There's something else," Margaret said, handing her a blurry photo. "Helena didn't die in the accident. She died 2 hours later in the hospital, fully conscious. And before she died, she said something to the nurse about protecting the girl from the monster." Jasmine felt tears burn her eyes. Her mother had died knowing her daughter was in danger. But if Richard thought she was a dead girl and buried, he was about to find out that some ghosts come back to haunt you. Margaret handed her a folder filled with documents. "Everything you need is here." "But Jasmine, this man is dangerous. If he killed your mother to get the inheritance?" "He won't hurt me," Jasmine replied with a calmness that surprised even herself. "Because he doesn't. Know I exist, and that would be her greatest advantage." While Richard Blackwell continued his life as a lying philanthropist, believing that all his secrets were buried with a daughter who never died, Jasmine planned the most dramatic reunion of his life. She had already decided how she would do it. At his foundation's next charity event, ironically, a gala for orphan children, Richard Blackwell would discover that death sometimes has a very particular way of collecting its debts. The question hanging in the air was simple. What happens when a man who profited from his daughter's supposed death discovers that she is not only alive, but knows everything? The answer would come soon, and it would be more devastating than Richard could ever imagine. The Blackwell Foundation's annual gala for orphan children was in full swing. Richard was on stage talking about second chances and the transformative power of a father's love, while the Millionaire guests applauded his inspiring generosity. Jasmine, dressed as a waitress, circulated the room with a tray of champagne and a smile that hid 20 years of pent-up anger. Today, Richard Blackwell would finally meet his daughter. "Ladies and gentlemen," Richard continued his rehearsed speech, "as someone who tragically lost a daughter, I know the pain these children carry. That's why our foundation." That's when Jasmine approached the stage and took the microphone from an assistant. "Excuse me, Mr. Blackwell, can I ask you a question?" The silence cut through the air like a knife. Richard looked at her with ill-concealed irritation. "Miss, shouldn't you be serving drinks?" "Of course. But as the daughter of orphans, your speech touched me deeply." Jasmine stepped onto the stage, ignoring the murmurs from the audience. "Especially when you said you lost a daughter. Can you tell us more about that?" Richard forced a smile. "Well, it was a personal tragedy. I'd rather not go into details." "That's a shame." Jasmine turned on the microphone because I have some very interesting details about your lost daughter. Richard's expression changed instantly. His eyes narrowed as he studied Jasmine's face. For the first time, he really saw her. First, she didn't die in an accident. Second, you abandoned her after killing her mother so you could get her inheritance. Third, Jasmine smiled. She's right here in front of you, and she has some questions. For Daddy. The blood drained from Richard's face. You can't be Jasmine Helena Mitchell. Or rather, Jasmine Helena Blackwell, your daughter, whom you declared dead to collect $500,000 in life insurance. The audience exploded in murmurs. Richard tried to grab the microphone, but Jasmine stepped away. "Ladies and gentlemen, how about we get to know the real Richard Blackwell?" Jasmine pulled out a thick envelope. "Here are the fake death certificates he created for me and my mother. Here are the life insurance receipts he received for our deaths. And here," she held up an enlarged photo, "is Helena Blackwell's autopsy report showing that she didn't die in the accident. She was poisoned 2 hours earlier." Richard staggered. That's absurd slander." "Is it?" Jasmine pointed to the large screen behind the stage. "Then explain to me why you have my childhood photo hanging in your private office." The photo appeared on the screen, the same one Jasmine had secretly photographed in the mansion. But now everyone could see the inscription on the back. "To the most amazing dad in the world. I love you, Jasmine." The audience fell silent. 20 years, Richard." Jasmine turned to him. 20 years I grew up thinking I was worthless, that my parents had died and abandoned me. Meanwhile, you used our tragedy to build your image as a philanthropist, making millions in donations that never reached the real children. Margaret appeared at the side of the stage, signaling that she was recording everything. "But you know what's even funnier?" Jasmine laughed. "You hired me to serve champagne at the gala for the foundation you created on the back of our fake deaths. What a cruel irony, isn't it?" Richard tried to recover. "You have no real proof of any of this." "I don't." Jasmine smiled. "Press people did. You get the files I emailed you 5 minutes ago, including the recordings of Richard admitting to his lawyer that he got rid of the problem of his wife and daughter?" The journalist's cameras began flashing wildly. Richard looked around, watching his reputation crumble in real time. "You," he whispered, finally understanding the extent of the trap. "You planned all of this." "Of course I did. You taught me that revenge is best served cold. And Dad," Jasmine savored the word, 20 years is a long time to cool." The audience began to rise and leave, many calling to cancel their donations. Richard stood on stage alone, watching his entire life crumble as his dead daughter looked at him with the same coldness he had shown her 2 decades earlier. Oh, and Jasmine stepped down from the stage. "You'll be thrilled to know that the FBI is on its way to arrest you for insurance fraud, murder, and money laundering," they said. "My evidence is more than sufficient." As the sirens began to wail outside, Richard Blackwell finally understood that he had seriously underestimated the daughter he thought he had buried forever. But as the handcuffs closed around his wrists, one question hung in the air after 20 years of lies, betrayal, and revenge executed with surgical precision. Was it possible that a family destroyed by greed could find some kind of redemption? Or are some wounds too deep to heal, even when justice finally prevails? 6 months after Richard Blackwell's arrest, Jasmine sat in the office that had once belonged to the man who had tried to erase her existence. The plaque on the door now read Helena Blackwell Foundation Executive Director Jasmine Mitchell. The FBI had frozen all of Richard's assets after discovering that only 12% of the foundation's donations actually reached the orphan children. The rest financed the luxurious lifestyle of a man who had built his empire on corpses and lies. "Ironic, isn't it?" commented Margaret, now her official assistant, leafing through the financial reports. "He used her death to raise millions, and now you're using those same millions to do the work he pretended to do." Jasmine smiled as she signed a check for the construction of the 5th new orphanage. The money confiscated from Richard would be used for exactly what he had always promised, but this time for real. The transformation in Jasmine's life had been radical and public. The waitress who served champagne to the elite was now on the cover of national magazines, such as The Daughter Who Came Back from the Dead to Seek Justice, and Time magazine had named her one of the 30 most influential people of the year. TV shows were vying for exclusive interviews about how she had exposed one of the biggest charity fraud schemes in the country. "You've become more famous than he is," laughed Marcus, the former bartender who now worked as the new foundation's event coordinator. "Richard Blackwell spent decades building a reputation, and you destroyed it in 20 minutes. And what a destruction it had been." News about Richard came regularly from the prison system, each piece more devastating than the last. His former associates had filed lawsuits to recover the $8.2 million they had invested in the fraudulent foundation. His 3 ex-wives had broken their confidentiality agreements and were publishing tell books, Married to a Monster, Life with a Psychopath, and How I Escaped a Killer. The exclusive golf club where he played had removed his honorary member plaque and renamed the annual tournament that bore his name. The university had removed his honor from the library building. Even the church he attended asked him not to return after his release. More importantly, Jasmine had found her real family. During her investigations, she discovered that Helena had a sister, Sarah, who had searched for Jasmine for years before giving up, believing her niece was truly dead. "You have her eyes," Sarah had said at their first meeting, holding up an old photo of Helena. "Your mother would be so proud to see who you've become." Sarah had become more than an aunt. She was the family Jasmine never knew she had. Together, they had created a complete file on Helena, documenting her work as an activist and her fight for children's rights. The investigation Helena had begun into corrupt adoption agencies was now being conducted by the FBI, resulting in 47 arrests and the closure of 12 illegal agencies. "Helena didn't die in vain," Sarah said during one of the many nights they spent organizing her sister's documents. "She planted seeds that you've made blossom into an entire forest." Richard, meanwhile, faced a very different reality. Sentenced to 25 years in prison for murder, fraud, and money laundering. He had lost not only his freedom, but also his entire fortune, which had been confiscated for reparations. His high society friends had vanished into thin air, and his reputation was irrevocably destroyed. The letters he tried to send to Jasmine always came back unanswered. In one of them, which Margaret had intercepted, he wrote, "I was young and stupid when this happened. If you really are my daughter, please forgive me. I can explain everything." Jasmine had torn up the letter without finishing it. Forgiveness was a luxury that murderers did not deserve. But the true measure of Jasmine's success was not in the headlines or financial reports. It was in the 847 letters she received, each month from children whose lives have been transformed by the new foundation. "Jasmine, I got a scholarship to study medicine at Harvard," wrote 16-year-old Amanda. "Thank you for teaching me that our past does not have to define our future. You inspired me to become a lawyer," said another letter from a 14-year-old boy. "I want to defend children like you defended your mother. Thanks to the foundation, our family is finally reunited after 8 years apart," wrote a mother. "My children, our home." In an interview on CNN 6 months after Richard's arrest, Anderson Cooper asked Jasmine if she felt anger toward her biological father. She thought carefully before answering. Anger is a luxury I can't afford. Richard Blackwell taught me unintentionally the most valuable lesson of my life, that our origins don't define our destiny. He tried to erase me from history, but he only gave me a blank page to write my own story. The program showed impressive images of the new foundation in operation, 5 modern orphanages, 200 children receiving quality education, 89 families reunited, 156 young people receiving college, scholarships, all funded by money Richard had stolen thinking he would never be found out. The difference between us, Jasmine continued, is that he used a tragedy to benefit himself. I used a tragedy to benefit others. He built an empire of lies. I built a legacy of truth. The last scene of the program showed Jasmine visiting Helena's grave for the first time. She had had a new pink marble headstone made, replacing the simple plaque that read only Helena Blackwell, 1975 to 2003, with a more complete message. Helena Blackwell, mother, activist, heroine. She fought for those who had no voice. Her daughter has completed the mission. "We did it, Mom," Jasmine whispered, leaving a bouquet of white roses. "The justice you sought has finally come. And you know what's best? It came through the daughter he tried to erase, but whom you raised to be indestructible." As she left the cemetery, her cell phone buzzed with a notification that made her smile. It was an alert that the foundation had broken another record. More money raised in 1 week than Richard had actually donated in his entire career as a philanthropist. That night, alone in her new apartment with a panoramic view of Chicago, Jasmine reflected on her journey. From an invisible waitress serving champagne to those who despised her, she had become the voice of thousands of children who, like her, had been abandoned by the system. The phone rang. It was Sarah, her aunt, calling as she did every night. "How was your day, dear?" "Transformative," Jasmine replied, looking out the window at the city that now knew her as a heroine. 50 more children were adopted today through our program. How about you?" "I finished organizing Helena's journals. We're going to publish a book about her work." Jasmine smiled. Even in death, her mother was still saving lives. The best revenge hadn't been destroying Richard Blackwell, though that had been incredibly satisfying. The best revenge had been becoming everything he pretended to be, multiplied by 1,000 while he rotted in a cell, watching the news reports of how his dead daughter was building the legacy he had faked for decades. Richard had tried to erase Jasmine from history, but she hadn't just rewritten her own narrative. She had turned her pain into fuel to light the way for thousands of other children. Today, while Richard counts the days in a cold cell, waking to the clang of bars and sleeping on concrete, Jasmine wakes every day in Egyptian silk, knowing she's living the life her mother dreamed for her. And that is a victory that no prison, no lie, no betrayal can take away. If this story of justice, family, and transformation touched your heart, subscribe to the channel for more stories that prove that sometimes the most unlikely endings are exactly the ones we need to hear. Because true victory isn't just about surviving the storm. It's about becoming the lightning that transforms your survival into light for those still lost in the darkness.